Hello and welcome to our channel MarshStream, your public performance broadcast platform. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also donate to our tip jar and support the arts and artists of MarshStream by clicking the link below in the description. Check out our website at themarsh.org for all upcoming live performances. Now enjoy the show.
I'm so proud to present MarshStream's AAPI Roundtable featuring the wonderful performers David Hirata, Wei Wang, and Brenda Wong Aoki. We'll talk to each performer first and then see an excerpt from the work, then bring the performers together for our roundtable. So let's welcome David Hirata. For over 30 years, David Hirata has amazed audiences throughout the Bay Area with theatrical magic creations at the Exploratorium, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, and Oakland Museum, among many others. Hirata's solo performances at the Marsh include Kanji by Starlight, and in 2017, A Box Without a Bottom, centering on magician Namigoro Sumidagawa, who in 1866 became the first Japanese citizen in over 200 years to receive a passport to leave the country. As part of the Imperial Japanese troupe, he dazzled audiences across Victorian America with his exotic stage magic and became a media celebrity, but whose prized trick was appropriated by American magicians in yellowface and rechristened the Jackbox. The Japbox. So, hello, David. Welcome to MarshStream.
Hi, Stephanie.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. This will be first time performing since, this all began.
Well, you did do something on our Marsh.
Well, you're right. You're right. Let's just say I haven't been performing as often since we all went into shelter in place.
But he's been hosting up a storm on MarshStream, haven't you now?
Yep. Lots of great stuff.
So, David, what are you feeling about this whole, what's going on?
Because when you asked me to be part of this, I understood why. I mean, I'm part of the Marsh stable of artists, but I was also kind of hesitant, a little worried, because when we look at this rise, all these occurrences of anti-Asian American sentiment and hate out here, I just thought, well, what do I have to say about that? What about making that better? And I thought, gosh, I don't know if I do. As artists, I think we create to express ourselves, to share stories, and that's kind of where I think our role comes in. Box Without a Bottom was telling a particular story about. I would sometimes somewhat glibly say, well, it's like the history of Japanese Americans told through stage magic, and particularly through this particular historical figure, several historical figures. So there is sharing story. Speaking as also a member of the Marsh staff, I've held a lot of roles here as a member of an arts organization. I feel we have a responsibility to help these diverse stories, these diverse voices be heard. But also, I think in recent years, what things that we've seen with the movement towards racial justice, we have certain responsibilities in the arts to build diversity within the organizations themselves, within the staff, within the leadership, board members, and so forth, because so many decisions get made there. And so that's something that I think about a lot. And am I answering your question here?
Yes. Keep going, David. You're answering
it. So, Box Without a Bottom was my last show, and that was a a Japanese American perspective. And, maybe it says something that just sort of organically, the piece I started working on just before Shelter in Place, I think it has its roots in the history of magic. Also, the spiritualist movement of the mid 19th century, and seances and spook shows and things like that. But believe it or not, I think it ties into the idea that I'm hoping to weave into it. Has something to do with tribal loyalty, or the creations of tribes and social groups, which sounds really weird, but that's kind of the thread that I'm running with on this. And I think, because if we're going to look at questions of racial tension, racial hatred, racial harmony, at the end of the day, it has to do with a question of how do we get along? How well are we getting along? How can we get along better? So maybe in a way, this new piece, which again, I don't know where it's going to lead, but that it seems to be kind of out of this other impulse of looking at how people get along, essentially, is the basic idea of it. How communities are formed, how communities communicate. Maybe that's kind of another response to this. I won't know. If I work at my normal rate, I won't really know what this piece is about for about another year if I chip away at it at a good rate.
Well, this is great. This is the first I've heard of this new piece. That's wonderful. But two of the pieces you've done at the Marsh, Kanji by Starlight and Box Without a Bottom, have all focused on Asian issues. You want to talk a little bit about Kanji by Starlight and what that was about?
Yeah. So, I think in a lot of ways, jumping ahead a little bit, Box Without a Bottom was kind of like the version of Kanji by Starlight I wanted to create back in 1998. In 1998, I was a relatively new resident of San Francisco. I had been a professional magician. I had done theater in college. And the Marsh was really taking off, and the solo performance scene was there. And that form as a way to explore theater. And for me, this idea that stage magic could be used as a storytelling device. And so Kanji by Starlight was my first swing at that. And it, the personal autobiographical story that I was telling through that had to do with my wrestling with my Japanese American identity and sort of what that all meant. And so it was basically my first experiment with solo performance theater and with working in magic, and then this personal story. And I thought I was done with it. When it was over, I thought, okay, that was done. That was nice. There were things I wish I could have done better, but essentially it was what it was. And I didn't expect to be revisiting that theme again. I wasn't against it. I just didn't think that I would. Box Without a Bottom actually kind of got its start because I became really interested in the story of a man named Richard Potter, who was the first American-born professional magician. He was born in 1781, thereabouts. So he was the first American-born professional magician, and he was the son of a slave. He was a black man. And I thought that was fascinating. And by all accounts, he was pretty amazing and very successful in his time. And I was fascinated by this man and what his stardom meant to the American story. So I was wrestling with that and chipping away things with it. Started working with Mark Kenberg, who teaches a class through the Marsh and has directed a lot of Marsh shows. And he kept kind of saying, it's like, I don't see you in here. Where are you in this? Where, this is kind of like a TED Talk. It's a nice lecture and it's fine. And so somewhere in here, then I was just doing a lot of reading on the history of magic, and I came across an article, a historical paper about the role of Japanese vaudevillians, these Japanese vaudeville troops that came over in the 1860s toward the United States and England. And the historian was saying that these, as part of the mass entertainment of the time, they were really the introduction of Japan to the American masses. That prior to that, the opportunity of the average American to see a Japanese person in person, there wasn't an opportunity. And these people were the face of Japan for the American masses in the 1860s and the 1870s. They really started that. And I thought, and then kind of in the midst of this, I discovered that, Japan having been in isolation for 200 years, that the first passport that was ever issued was to a member of one of these troops, Namigoro Sumidogawa, who became quite a famous magician in the States. And I thought, my God, the first Japanese face that many Americans would have seen would have been a Japanese face. He would have been a Japanese magician's face. So it kind of went from there. And then, I discovered this connection of Sumidogawa with this other magician who I felt a different kind of personal connection to. And then that became that story. As I say in some places, a history of Japanese Americans told through stage magic.
And there's a different story too, because was it your mother's family that was put in an internment camp?
Yeah, I mean, that's very much a part of my, so this is kind of a little bit where, Mark nagging me to put myself in it. That's, technically I am what is called Yonsei, which is fourth generation Japanese American, because my father is third generation Sansei. But I've always identified with the Sansei, actually. And the reason for that is that I felt that sort of in the 80s and 90s, when I was sort of reaching adulthood and kind of really considering my own Asian identity, my Japanese American identity, there was a lot going on there in literature and journalism there. And it had a lot to do with those of us who were the sons and daughters of those Japanese Americans who were in the internment camps during World War II. And many of them were Nisei, second generation. They were citizens, they were American citizens, put imprisoned without due process. And so I kind of came to think of those of us who are Japanese Americans of my age as kind of the next generation after those who were in those camps. And so in some way, spiritually, kind of we were Sansei, if you know what I mean. So that's an incredibly important part of the Japanese American story, of the American story. And it's been a really satisfying thing for me in my life to see that story being told more. Not enough still, but it is much better known than I might have guessed it would be by the time I'm by 2020. We have a ways to go, but it is a story that is being heard, but we need to keep telling it.
Yeah, I remember EO, is it 906?
Executive Order 9066, which was the executive order signed by President Roosevelt, basically establishing the military authority to go round up Japanese Americans without due process under the excuse of national security.
And that is certainly a sign of the Asian hate issue, you know, from back then for sure. And just this, can we just touch on what happened with the title, and then
Yes.
we can work towards and getting to see a wonderful excerpt from.
Yeah. So some people in the audience may be aware, when I began developing this work, this piece which became Box Without a Bottom, my early drafts were under the title of the Jap box because it referred to this prop, which I could trace back to, you know, with reasonable historical evidence, to Namigoro Sumidogawa, the magician in 1866. And it was as you'll see in this excerpt and as I discuss in the show, it was this prop that I had this, you know, attraction repulsion, I won't call it love hate, attraction repulsion relationship with, and what it meant. And as I was developing it, I began to feel that the title, the Jap box, was an appropriate title for the piece. And I was a bit leery of this. I discussed this with my parents, with my family, with a number of Japanese American friends, and they all felt that it was a good choice. I premiered the show at the San Diego Fringe Festival, and I figured that would kind of be the real test, see how it went over. And the Japanese American audiences were some of my most supportive there, and I felt we were fine with that. When it opened, I then performed it. It was one of the featured shows at the Fog City Magic Festival in 2018. And then later that year, it premiered at the Marsh, at which time, the controversy arose about the title. And I can only assume that it had some more than a little to do with the raised profile of the show, that somehow it had flown below the radar with, 3 other runs. And after the various discussions, I realized a couple of things. One was that the essential nature that originally had me using the title, which had to do with the idea, as I did the research into these Japanese artists coming over in the 1860s, it's interesting to read the press accounts of the Imperial Japanese troupe was the one I was focused on, the particular company, and the extensive use of the word Jap. And in fact, I quote a Mark Twain piece in which he talks about them. But this was a time it was all very favorable. And in reading it, I felt that it was what I was reading in these press accounts is a convenient shortening of the word Japanese. It was a pretty neutral and often used in complimentary fashion. Where it begins to become a racial slur is really, there's a difference between these Japanese performers being on stage, this exotic show, and then Japanese people in the community. And there's a whole lot mixed in here. A lot of it had to do in California with Japanese families settling and becoming extremely economically successful and being perceived as an economic threat. The Chinese, the what I'll call the government-sponsored anti-Asian stuff, the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, that was all aimed at the Chinese. And again, it had a lot to do with a perceived economic threat. And then, the bigotry and hatred being leveraged, and, how one feeds off the other. We can't say with certainty, but they were feeding off of each other. And that the Japanese as a smaller group were kind of flying under the radar. They were Japanese immigration was limited in 1907 by the so-called Gentleman's Agreement between the U.S. and Japan, but it wasn't enforced. It wasn't until I think about 1915. I think that the Asian exclusion legislation it got gradually ratcheted up over the years, and that's where the Japanese, I think, were starting to really become included in a serious way, kind of that 1915-ish edition.
So David, so did you have to end up changing the title?
So, okay, so yeah, so you know, the piece had changed its focus around the title in a different way from when I had started. So for one thing, the title didn't fit in quite the way it had at the beginning. But more importantly, really, you know, I just found it's like, okay, you know what, this is still a really painful, painful word, painful touch point, painful whatever. And so, you know, the change just felt like the right thing to do. And so here we are. There's kind of, you know, there are more interesting, there were a lot of interesting discussions I had with various people about it. But, you know, we only have an hour here, and man, boy, am I really going over my time here? I did notice in the chat someone, oh, Linda, thank you for that. I always stumble over the term for the camps. And Linda points out incarceration camps, better term. I grew up saying internment camps, and I always kind of go like that. So yes, thank you for that. And for anyone who's interested, she does give a link to the Densho organization, which is an excellent source. So thank you for that catch.
So are you ready to perform an excerpt?
Yeah, so this is what I would call an excerpt adaptation of the show. This one begins with a personal story, with what I'll call Tales from the Trenches of Parenthood, Chapter 6, The Food of My People. Now, my daughter was 3 years old, and we had just had a very nice morning at the park, and so we went out to lunch to a noodle house where she tried sushi for the first time, and she liked it. But as we sat there sharing a platter of tekkemaki, she looked up at me and she said, "So am I Japanese?" "Well, you're half Japanese." "So I'm half Japanese and half regular." And I just kind of let it go. And I have no idea when this idea of regular was replaced in her head with white. Since we live in the Bay Area, it was very likely the following week. But all this came to my mind just recently when I went to the hardware store to buy some rope. Regular rope. White rope. The kind of rope that you would buy for a regular job. And it got me thinking about what it must be like to be rope of color. The kind of rope that's just as strong, just as flexible, but it isn't regular. Now, when I was growing up, dinner rolls were regular. Sushi rolls were us. The Beach Boys, they were regular. The story of Momotaro the Peach Boy, that was us. Now, I had seen every episode of The Brady Bunch, knew all the words to the Pledge of Allegiance, all those things that were a part of me. But somehow, it still didn't make me regular. Part Japanese, part regular. Now, magicians are irregular people. But when I was a kid, not very much older than my daughter was on that day, that was a group of people I wanted to be a part of. Since my very first trip to a magic shop when I was 8 years old. To me, a magic shop was this place of wonders. A place of miracles that could be bought for a very reasonable price. And as a kid, even though I was raised as a good Methodist, my Bible was the Magic Shop catalog, where I discovered such unique, exotic things as the Chenley water suspension. This, by the way, actually manufactured in Colon, Michigan. There was Buddha paper, note the spelling. That's probably because this one probably came from Azusa, California. And then, perhaps most vexing, the Jap box, deluxe Jap box. This one also from Colon, Michigan. So it was a surprise to me to discover that for a Japanese magician back in the 19th century, he may actually have had a soko nashi bako in his act. What he would have called not a Jap box, but a box without a bottom, soko nashi bako. Although it did have something of a removable bottom that came with it. And this soko nashi bako would have been used in the magic act of one Namigoro Sumidegawa, the first Japanese citizen to be granted a passport to enter America in 1866. It also might have been used by magicians like William Robinson of New York or David Bamberg of England, who performed under the stage names of Chung Ling Soo and Fu Manchu, with appropriate attire and makeup, of course. And then many years later, it became something that I was able to purchase myself, imported from Japan as a soko nashi bako. Namigoro Sumidegawa, William Robinson, David Bamberg, and me. Magicians all through time. A chain of stories, a chain of circumstance leading to today.
To Wei Wang. A little bio. Chinese dancer Wei Wong is the first ever Asian male principal dancer of the San Francisco Ballet. He was named an apprentice in 2012 and joined the company as a member of the Corps de Ballet the following year. From there, Wong was promoted to soloist in 2016 before becoming a principal dancer in 2018. Roles within the company include Creature and Frankenstein, Within the Golden Hour and Cinderella, Don Quixote, Prince and Sleeping Beauty, plus roles in Giselle, The Nutcracker, Romeo and Juliet, and Swan Lake. In 2019, he made his Royal Ballet debut as the Creature in Frankenstein. Wong trained at the Beijing Dance Academy and San Francisco Ballet School. Hello, Wei, how are you?
Hi, Stephanie. I'm good. I'm a little tired, to be honest, because I just had 6 hours rehearsal today. So I was done somewhere 6:30, but how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So glad you could be here with us.
I'm really happy to be here. And then I before saying anything, I just want to thank you for bringing me here tonight with you to share my life story and experience. I'm very happy. And then thanks to David for your performance. You gave me a good laugh and it really made me think about us as Asians.
So wait, you're from China, right? You grew up in China. What inspired you to become ballet dancer?
So yes, I was born in China about 28 years ago. Uh, Ballet for me, when I was little, I had absolutely no concept, no idea what is ballet like, and I hardly watched any ballet until I officially received um, like proper ballet training. So before that, I knew nothing about ballet. I studied some like I just like my parents thought I was sort of moving in the house a lot, and I like to move around with different stuff, like a piece of cloth, or like just like to hop around from the kitchen to the living room. So they put me in the studio, and that's when I started like doing some like simple dancing and stretching and all like the kid dancing stuff, and then um and then get a chance to audition the Beijing Dance Academy when I was 10 years old. And that everything from that point, my eyes were opened, wide opened. And then I get to know ballet, the art form of ballet, and I get to experience it as a, as a student at that time. It truly changed my life. But circle back on your question of like why why did I start studying ballet? It's because the truth is my family, they thought ballet is like it's the most elegant, is the most elegant art form out there, and then for people to see, for people to experience, and then it will be great. It will be a sort of a, it's like in the video game, it's going to be a level up for me as a person. And then it was just all started from there, as simple as that.
And how did you make your way to the San Francisco Ballet?
I have an aunt here, lives here, and she used to live in Sacramento, and then I attended a competition in China, and I won a award. I won third place, which it wasn't a big deal for me because I thought I could have done better in that time, but she really wanted to bring me. She thought she would bring me forward. She will bring me somewhere better. So she got me a flight ticket, and then she flew me here, and then show me around the city, and then but all I need was a good excuse to get my visa done, because it was not easy for me. It wasn't easy for any Chinese people to get a visa just to visit. So my cousin, the daughter of my aunt, and she found out San Francisco Ballet School auditioning was auditioning to seeking younger uprising dancers. They might join the school, to open more doors to younger dancers. So, but that was the last day before I head back to China, and then my aunt was saying, "Do you want to take that chance? Do you want to actually, that was your visa excuse, but do you actually wanted to do it? This might be your door to something else." I didn't think that too much because I didn't know San Francisco Ballet, and then I didn't know that much about the the ballet culture in the United States by then. So, but I still did it. I did it. Be honest, I did it for my aunt, for that, just in that moment. But luckily, I got scholarship from that auditioning. I was the last person in that room. I kept by a so the ballet teachers were auditioning all the students. They were sitting in a line behind a table in the front. So facing at least 5, 6 ballet dancers that I don't even know, and then I hardly spoke any English. I mean, I'm still working on it, but I was like quite frightened by that circumstance. Like I can't even like properly explain myself where I was from and then what's my situation. But when I try like finally told them that I have 1 more year in Beijing, then I will properly graduate from high school. So they said, "We'll wait. We'll wait for you." And then I got super touched by that, and then I went back to China. And after a year, I actually like did the promise that I came here. I didn't look at anywhere else.
Well, it's amazing. You went from that, you're what, a little 17 or 16-year-old self, and now you're a principal male dancer at the ballet, the first Asian principal male dancer. Why do you think it took 77 years for that to happen?
Um, if I'm here talking like representing myself, I can't. Just because as a dancer, I know dancers. I know how the dancer world works. But if I speak for the company, then this is not a question about, you know, why does it take so long for you to hire or promote an Asian principal dancer? Dancer world works in a very complex way. It has to be a good timing. It has to be put in lots of effort and works. And for people that recognize and for people to appreciate, for people to actually do the work they do and then bring me or many others forward to represent this company. I think if I just have to simply speak for the company, I think they did a really good job on like looking for dancers that are different, and which is San Francisco Ballet. It's known as its diversity of dancers. Like you get different variety, you get different tastes, you get Asian, you get black dancers, you get white dancers, you get uh, Hispanic dancers from different places, different country, different part of the world. So I think it's just the matter of if I have to look back, um, every step of the way that I did was the right step to lead me here. But I can't speak of the company why they don't have a Asian male dancer before me, but they do have a female Chinese Asian ballerina in the company for a long time. But I have to say I appreciate that I actually made it
Well,
into that spot.
we sure appreciate it too, Wei, because Wei and I are even working on a project together, and I'm so thrilled about it. But so it sounds like you're not feeling a lot of Asian hate within the ballet or anything like that. Just wondering if you're finding it in the city, or in San Francisco. Have you experienced any problems with Asian hate or racism or prejudice?
Yes, I'm gonna start a little bit on the ballet side, and then I'll move on to the outside. So I for my company with all the dancers, with all the staff and ballet masters, which is our coaches and the director, I feel very protected within the organization. I do feel they give me, it's like a safety blanket over me. If to be frankly, and then the ballet, it's really recently the ballets give everyone inside the organization a IDEA training section, which is equity, diversity. I'm missing something.
Inclusion.
Inclusion and access. Yes. So they brought everyone to a Zoom room and invited a mentor, and then so that everyone get to talk about their feelings, where they're coming from, and then like everyone's their background and stuff like that, so that we truly understand each other better, and then creates a more healthier environment at the ballet. And then the ballet recently they're just starting to reach out different communities and doing some work, which I right here I can't I'm technically I'm not allowed to say it yet, but we do have some projects coming up with where they're collaborating with the dancers and lots of the Asian dancers as well. So that I'm very looking forward to. I just see that they're willing to take a step forward of this AAPI situation, which is, yeah, as an Asian dancer, I'm not completely satisfied with the situation right now, but we just have to move forward, move along with it, and then make a better decision, or make, a better self. Anyway, and then outside of ballet, I had this story that I was I have a scooter. I use scooter as my transportation from home to the ballet. So one day I came back from the ballet, and there's one person. I certainly that wasn't an Asian person, was yelling to me that, "Hey, Asian boy, go back where you come from." But in a moment, I didn't care, like that was just one crazy word out of that person's mouth, one just crazy saying, and then I just drove away with my scooter. But it might be something small for me, and it might be something just like forgettable saying from that person. But when like think back of that moment, it's a vulnerable moment for me. And if anyone in my shoe in that moment, I'm sure they will feel vulnerable. They don't know what to do. They feel helpless. Just because either that person was drunk, or that person said something not intentional or not on purpose. But everything you say, that reflects on another person. And then if you don't know that person, if you don't understand that person that you're speaking to, that it might becoming a attack. It might becoming a stab in the back.
A real stab in the back, right? Which is
Yeah.
so frightening about things we're hearing, right? What you're coming to out into the light right now. Not to say it hasn't happened before, but scary times. I know just one more thing, and then we're going to watch an excerpt, but I know you have some feelings about being a role model for Asian kids coming up into the dance world and the arts.
And then again, that's why I really appreciate San Francisco Ballet. Um, what they did was there's lots of, and then they know they're really focusing on heavy on education and then passing this ballet torch to younger generation, to another generation, so that and then it's important that in the Bay Area that we just have lots of uh, heavy on the Asian population. So we have lots of Asian audience, so we have lots of Asian supporters, and then which they all have their kids and they all have their younger generation. But what we see is that you don't know that if there's a little boy sitting in the audience watching Nutcracker in Christmas and then saying, yelling out like, "Wow, there's an Asian prince in Nutcracker play," or the full length of Nutcracker ballet. Can I do that as well? So I think before I get promoted to principal dancers, I was heavily focusing on myself, that what can I do with my career? But the day when I promoted, well, that's a bit dramatic and exaggerated, but like the next when I step into a principal position, that I realize it's a little bit more than just having, laying down or like having a good career of myself. It's that responsibility that I'm carrying on my shoulder of what I can do. I don't have to do much, but doing the best of myself, and then dance the best of I can do to sort of make a example of younger dancers and younger Asian dancers, that if I can make it, you all can make it one day if you really want to try. Like that's something that I'm telling myself, which this inspire me to keep myself keep on moving from days to days, because every day 6 hours plus an hour and a half of class, it's not that easy, especially when I'm getting older. So, but it's but it's definitely inspiring to think about one day when the pandemic is finally over, I get to see so many Asian faces or Asian kids sitting in the audience, and they came to my show, and I get to dance for them or dance to the whole audience of Opera House. I feel proud, and I definitely, and then of course, I feel prouder standing by all the dancers in San Francisco Ballet. They're not Asian or Asian, any race, that we are doing a show together. I feel proud.
Well, thank you, Wei. You should be. And now we're going to see some of your beautiful dancing. Thank you, Wei. That is so beautiful. Just quickly, what were we seeing? We were seeing kind of a COVID piece in your living room was number one. And number
Yes.
two was?
Bluebird from the full-length ballet Sleeping Beauty.
And the third was, I guess, what were you doing in, that was in your, what?
Third ballet was a piece called Anima Animus, created by David Dawson, the choreographer. We did that piece 1 year in a program that our director Helgi Tomlinson. That program was called Unbun. He wanted to bring all 12 choreographers from different place, different race together, and then create 12 new ballets for that season. It was a big deal, and that was a little sneak peek of what we did in the studio, and they had a live stream many years ago.
So beautiful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was fun talking to you.
Now let's welcome our third and final artist of the night, Brenda Wong Aoki. She's a multi-award-winning storyteller, anthology-sized playwright, producer. I'm doubling up for some reason. I don't know why. Artistic director and performer who draws inspiration from the family's 121 history in San Francisco and the Bay Area, kabuki legends, ghost stories, and her personal experiences. Her plays have been commissioned and supported by the U.S. Congressional Civil Liberties, Public Education Fund, Dramatists Guild. I'm going to skip a little bit since there seems to be an echo. She is the current artistic director for First Voice, an organization centered on incorporating Asian theater, as well as musical and spoken word traditions into indigenous American art forms like jazz and contemporary performance art. Welcome, Brenda.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
We are so glad to have you. So, I can hear myself echoing. Is there something? Does anyone have any idea what's going on that I'm doubling up here with my voice?
I don't know. It sounds okay to me, but I don't know. Ask somebody else.
I think it's a Mark question. So I was being fine before. So anyway, I will just ignore it. Okay. So tell us, Brenda, you have roots in the Chinese and Japanese.
Now you're freezing a bit, but am I fine? I'll just continue talking.
You're fine and beautiful. Just talk.
Okay, well, it was wonderful getting to watch David and Wei and seeing what their art's about. And it made me think, everything I was going to tell you didn't have too much to do with art, but so maybe I should talk a little bit about my art, where it comes from. I've made a living as a performing artist since 1976, which is kind of an amazing thing to do. And doing original work is also a difficult thing to do. But at the time that I was coming up, there were not really very many places that people of color could actually do their work. So, and the roles of me as an actor that were available was geisha, prostitute, cook. Geisha, prostitute, cook, after a while it gets and I came up at a time where it was very important, and it still is very important, to have voice voice for my lived experience. So I studied dance and I studied theater and I studied music, but ultimately I studied No and Kyogen, and I ended up studying with Yuriko Doi here in San Francisco. But I also studied with her sensei, Nomura Mansaku, who's a living treasure, doing Kyogen. And the reason why I studied Kyogen is because it's a man's art form. And at the time I thought, well, shoot, then I definitely want to do something that only men can do. And Kyogen is a story of the common people. It's like Commedia dell'arte. It's where ordinary people always win. And I grew up, I'm a Hapa Mestiza mama. I'm Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, and Scots. I grew up in a naval base where all the kids were like me, and we were all mixed up kids. And I loved the fact that Kyogen was about the common people, and because I come from common people. My mom and dad had a store. I'm the eldest of 6 kids, and racism. I'm very familiar with racism. So my mom and dad and I, being the eldest, we'd all work at the store, and I was at the candy counter, and I mean, just on the regular, we were always taught that the customer's always right. And we were always like, can I help you? Can I help you? It just comes out of my mouth so naturally still, can I help you? And the customers would come in and say to my mother, chop, 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 chop. And to my father, Deva, hey, Deva, hurry up, because I wanted my thing, yeah. And, this is kind of regular. Growing up, this is what would happen in the store. Of course, my dad was very humorous. He'd always say, fuck you very much. Fuck you very much. And they were so racist they could never hear what he was actually saying. So as I grew up, and I went through so many things. I mean, I went through the Watts riots. I went through the Rodney King riots. I was invited to be with the Muslims. Back when Malcolm X came back from Mecca, and he realized that a lot of Muslims in Mecca were different colors. And during the time that Dr. King was beginning to march with lots of different colored people, and being a person of mixed race, I always wanted to find a place where we all could get along, like the way I grew up on the West Side. And I'm not sure, but it might even be that some of my friends from the West Side are on this call, because we're still friends 50, 60 years later. And my reason for going into the arts was to give voice to a lived experience, to the experience of people like my parents, like the kids I grew up with, regular, essential workers. This country is built on our backs, and we need to have voice. And my reason for becoming an artist was to give voice to an experience. I am a touring artist. Touring artist means that I don't have people, on the road. You're kind of vulnerable. You're, especially when I'm by myself. I do work with dancers. I do work with musicians. I do work with lots of different people. But a whole lot of the times I toured all over this country, a lot of places in the world alone. And when you do that, there's no protection. It's just one woman alone going into a new community. When I first started touring in the 80s, there were very few women on the road, especially women of color. There was myself and maybe 2 Black storytellers and a whole bunch of cowboy poets. Musicians have always been on the road. But you have to create work that plays in San Francisco, but also plays in Lansing, Michigan, and Kansas City, and Louisville. And I didn't ever want to really back off of telling what needs to be said, really speaking to the humanity behind a face. Even if I'm representing the other, I want people to understand that the other is human. And so, yeah, I think it's really, I have to give it up for being a road warrior. People who are on the road, it's hard. The excerpt that I'm going to do later, it's actually about a real experience that happened to me on the road in the 90s, actually in the 90s, where the religious right started chasing me from state to state. I think about my life, and my husband and I, we have a son. My husband's Mark Izu. A lot of people know him. He's a composer and a musician. And our son, like Wei, was a dancer, and he danced with us for many years. So we toured all over together. But yeah, let's see. Why was I telling you that part of the story?
So maybe you can tell us a few of your tour stories.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, right. That's, I guess, there's so many tour stories to tell. It's such a great chance to actually tell them because nobody knows what it's like. Well, once I performed, and after the performance, some audience members who happened to be Asian came to greet me. And after I left, I realized I'd been abandoned in the dark on the loading dock with no cell phone and no way to get home because the producer assumed that these Asian audience members were my family. Another time, kind of the big deal of my career was that I was at the Kennedy Center, on the marquee, Brenda Wong Aoki. So I brought my parents and my aunt and uncle, and I used up all my artist fees so that they could come see me. And they're so cute. They took the tour like 3 times so they could point to the marquee and say, that's my daughter, right? But backstage at places, just as the stage manager says, go, I'm snatched by the Secret Service because I think it was Ronald Reagan was giving a speech in the lobby, and they assumed that I was a ninja assassin. And they had to wait until somebody from the Kennedy Center said, no, actually, that really is Brenda Wong Aoki. What I learned is when it's possible, it's best to bring a stage manager, road manager with you who's white. And that way there's an interface early on, kind of a buffer. And otherwise, if I just show up, sometimes they think I'm the cleaning lady. So it's racism is very, yeah. It's fascinating to me that the only country in the world is our baby country, the United States, does not have a national culture. We should be investing in a national culture that represents all of us who are here, but we're actually divesting in anything except pseudo-European stuff. So a pseudo because we're not Europe, right? If we were Europe, it's different. So my work is about giving voice to my lived experience, and I think about racism, it's so deep. I think about whose shoulders I stand on. I think of my father, who was in the Korean War, who spent the 1940s hiding from night riders who were looking to lynch Japs in Utah. I think of my husband's mother incarcerated in Poston. I think about my grandpa on my Chinese side, who made a living gathering seaweed because he had escaped the massacres of the Chinese in the 1800s. There were like 40 Chinatowns, and the Chinatowns were burnt down, and people were shot and lynched as they fled. And then I think of standing on those shoulders. I think about my grandfather on the Japanese side. My grandfather was actually the founder of the first Japanese settlement in America, Japantown, San Francisco. He was one of the world's first Japanese Christian priests. And my family in Japan were one of the only kakuriki Christians. They were hidden Christians, probably from the Silk Road. So they were othered in Japan. And so my grandfather was sent to America to start the first Japanese settlement, but he's kicked out to Utah because he believes that all people should be able to marry whomever they want to marry. So my uncle married a white woman, so my grandfather, condoning it, was sent to Utah, which is how we end up being in Utah. On the Chinese side, my great-grandmother is 100% Scots. Now, I just think it's fascinating that, nobody can see the Scots in me. Why is that? That you suddenly, you can't see the white in me, but 1/16th drop of Japanese blood would be enough to put you in a prison camp. Why isn't 1/8 white blood enough to see that I'm white, right? So this is where you start to see how deep racism is. My Chinese side, my Scots great-grandmother married a Chinaman. He was there before, at the very beginning. She came over with the penal colony. They got married. He and his brother founded Queensland. They turned the bush into farmland. They put in the railroad. They put in electricity. And after they had established Queensland, the Australian government made it illegal for Chinese to own land. And that's how we ended up coming here. So, it's not just the United States. It's lots of different places. But I have to say, this whole thing about Asian hate, this country was built on genocide of Native American people. We're on occupied Ohlone land. It was then built on the backs of Black slaves. And then the infrastructure was put in with Chinese workmen. And the breadbasket of America, California, the Central Valley was made farmland by Japanese. The fishing industry was made, the fishing industry came from Japanese. There's the Filipinos. So anyway, there's people of color have built this place. And it's not that I'm standing here to say I am Asian. I think that I'm really standing there to say I am human.
And wow, Brenda, you are so human and beautiful. But yet you're afraid to go out now, right? The things going around you are very close to home, aren't they?
Yes. And so a lot of people don't know the things that I know because I run an organization with Mark called First Voice. It's a nonprofit organization, and we're on the API Council. The API Council is a coalition of, I think, 50 nonprofits, API nonprofits, mainly social service. So since it's mainly social service, we find out what's going on. And the beautiful women who are doing Stop Asian Hate, they are Chinese Progressive Association and Chinese for Affirmative Action. They're the ones who have sounded the alarm nationally about what's going on. And we actually had a meeting with Nancy Pelosi like a couple of weeks ago, and she came and it's happening all over the country. The reason why people think it's only happening in New York and California is because there's a political will to publicize it here. But in other places in the country, it's happening, but nobody cares. So for us, the Thai grandpa that was shoved to the ground and killed on his morning walk is just a few blocks from us. That happened just a few blocks from us. Mark and I were stalked in Golden Gate Park for miles before anybody came to help us by a man calling us the virus. and we couldn't go home because we didn't want them to know where we lived. I know from the API Council that there are home invasions right now where the women are raped, their men brutalized all in front of their children. There are old seniors who are having home invasions, who are being killed. The children are scared to death to go back to school. In Chinatown, people thought that it was because it was too dark, so that's the reason why they asked the city to put in more lights so the elders wouldn't be hit by cars. There were so many hit and runs. But it wasn't the lights. They put in more lights, and the hits are still happening. We know of Asian women being in the outer mission, being attacked from behind and then kicked in the face. It's horrendous what's going on now, actually. And it's not about, okay, stop Asian hate. Stop hate. Oh my God, just stop it. Hate. It's the whole point is just to live, isn't it? Isn't that the point? And to live well and to live in community?
Yes. I think we can all say yes to that, Brenda.
Oh dear, you're freezing. Am I okay?
It's the combination. Two women freezing each other. So why don't you perform?
Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful that you're allowing, voice. And I think the Marsh has been so spectacular in that, and letting people have voice. And it's really a time we've got to keep pushing. We're so close to the tipping point of just making everybody just a part of the United States, really. And I think that's why the pushback is so intense right now, because we're so close. And it's not about, one person, one group or another. It's about just understanding that everybody has a right to a place in the sun.
I think we can all agree on that. Would you
So would you like me to intro what I'm going to do, or
I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay, because what I'm going to do is an excerpt from Aunt Lily's Flower Book, which is a piece that I do with Mark and Shoko Hikage, two musicians, and a lot of multimedia. And it's the part I'm going to show you guys is a short little excerpt, but it really happened, and I made it comedic so that people will listen. And once I can get them on my side, then I can go deeper. So the rest of the play get deeper, but it always has to start in a way that you can reach people so that they'll be on your side. So that's what this is about. So this is a true story. It happened while I was on tour. I was on stage performing. Mukashi. Long, long ago, at the edge of a great forest, there was a modest little inn. Which go home. There's a woman standing up in the back of the audience with a sign. It says, which go home. I wonder who she's talking to. The innkeeper had a kind and beautiful young daughter named Kyo. Which go home. Now there are more women with signs popping up out of the audience. But I'm a professional. I go on. Kyo had been taught ever since she was a tiny little girl to think nothing of herself, but always of the welfare of others. So she cooked and cleaned, working hard every day to bring happiness to those around her. Witch, go home! They're marching down the center aisles. Witch, go home! They're pulling people out of their seats. Witch, go home! The children are freaked out. They're crying. Witch, go home! Witch, go home! Witch, go home! I'm so freaked out. Ah! Nobody out there looks like me. It is so scary out here. I left my heart. Oh, in San Francisco. Oh God, the cherry blossom smokes. It's a producer, Brenda. That was a really good show, but we have a number of community members who are a little concerned that what you're doing out there is anti-Christian. I'm Presbyterian. Ha! They don't like it when you're speaking that other language. Japanese? In your next show, just cut that part out, okay? I call my agent. Tell me why I'm here again? Because Brenda Wong Aoki, you are bringing diversity to the rest of America. Rest of America, that's easy for him to say. He's a straight white guy. I mean, honey, you are an icebreaker. Icebreaker, you know what that is? That's a big mothership who goes out there where it's cold and dark and nobody else wants to go. She cuts through the ice and all that stuff flies up in her face. And when she's finished, everybody else gets to cruise on through. Icebreaker. I clean myself up, wipe off the sweat, and get ready to go to the reception. I try and pretend like it's perfectly normal to have people pop up out of the audience with signs screaming at me. When one of the society ladies comes up to me, you know the kind, starved to perfection. Brenda, it's a delight. It's been just a delight working with you because let's face it, you speak such good English. Thank you. I was born here. Oh, no. I thought we bought a real one. Now they're taking me to the corner, to the guy who's paid the really big bucks. He's sitting over there looking like a great big toad. What part of Japan you from? I'm not from Japan. Actually, I'm Chinese, Japanese, Spanish, and Scots. My real name is Brenda Jean, and I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. What part of Japan is Salt Lake City, Utah? It's not in Japan, it's in the United States. Huh? Well, that's why your eyes aren't as slanty as the rest. Thank you.
That's wonderful in its own difficult way. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It was great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you. You have so much to say. Everyone has so much to say. Let's bring back, we don't have a lot of time, I guess, like this for a real roundtable, but I think our roundtable has been our performance table. So if Wei and David want to come back on now. Thank you to everyone. I don't know, there's some great kudos to all of you in the chat. Maybe if anybody, let's just take just a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions or some last words from our wonderful performers and participants tonight.
I'm just tracking all the love and thoughts in the chat right now. Sorry. So I mean, I have to say, to you in the audience, thank you for engaging in this show the way you have. It's really wonderful because not every Zoom show is like this. Brenda, I've been an admirer of yours for a long, long time. Your icebreaker passage there, kind of, just when I think I can't be any more impressed by you, you ratchet it up. Wei, it was such a thrill to see you work at last. It literally brought a tear to my eye, literally.
Thank you. Thank you,
so I just want to thank the two of you for a great evening, and Stephanie for bringing it all together.
Thank you, everybody. Wei?
And for me, I'm just knowing that I'm hearing from Brenda and David that they're understanding their, learning about their stories and seeing their performance, just like it truly just make me think, give me lots of thoughts on, I guess, constructing as a person, and then knowing that what do I need to do down the path for the future of my career or as a person. And then just I'm so appreciate that Stephanie that brought us together and talk about our experiences.
Wonderful, wonderful. Brenda, I guess even though you just talked, please.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was that it's really important for artists to do our work. And thank you for the Marsh for doing this. But I think that in this time, especially, it's really important for artists we're soldiers, SOULGERS. Our job is to inspire. That I got that from Queen Latifah. I didn't say it. But our job is to inspire and to gather the people together and to weave the invisible. And so much of the didactic, rhetorical splinterism that we're seeing now in the internet and even it's in some social justice sections, it's more separation than it is pulling us together. And we have to always remember what are we fighting for? I think that's really important. And I think artists, we have to hold it down. We have to hold it down to the earth, to our souls. And our job is to inspire, to give hope, to connect. And I wanted to say that one little story is when I was a kid, the thing that really changed my life was the Blue Fairy. And I lived in a pretty, working class neighborhood next to the oil refinery. The sky was always orange. It was LAPD would come over every night with the helicopters to look for the gangs. And I mean, it is a heavy, heavy place where we lived. Snoop Dogg used to play basketball with my little brother in the backyard. That was our claim to fame. But one day, the Blue Fairy came to the rec center. And I remember all the kids are like, "What's a Blue Fairy?" And we all go marching into this cinder block building, and we sit on the floor. And I don't remember the play, and I don't think it was even really that good. All I remember is that this woman came out, and she was the Blue Fairy, and suddenly I was no longer the eldest, dutiful daughter of an Asian family working to take care of my brothers and sisters and working at the store. I was transported into another world where I was free and I could dream and magic things could happen. And I think that for me, what I've wanted to do my whole life is just to be the Blue Fairy to some other little kid like that who suddenly is free because they were lifted out of their circumstances at the moment and realize all these possibilities. So artists got to keep on being artists.
Such a beautiful
That's true.
story for all of us. Thank you, Brenda, Wei, and David, and Brian Williamson for producing it. What a wonderful, I think, not to be prejudiced or anything, night of stories and artistry and discussion. And the discussion needs to continue on and on and on. How we're all human. Forget the hate. Remember the love and like in our community. So thank you all for joining us. All the participants, consider making a tip to keep this MarshStream and our artists going.